Though you know, Social Security, of course, was created in 1935. Public employees were not eligible because at that time, state employees, city, county, town employees did not have Social Security. And there was no common fund in the state of Indiana. There might have been individual retirement plans by cities and counties, et cetera, but there was not a common fund that would cover anybody or any employer that wanted employees covered. So in 1946, the first retiree of the Public Employees Retirement Fund in July received the first checks ever issued by PERF. At that time, it was, I think, 100% state employees. Obviously, any employer could register their employees, enroll the employees in PERF, but initially, I think it was just the state. And then federal legislation was changed to allow public employees to be covered by Social Security. So what would happen in 1955, there was a new Public Employees Retirement Fund created, if you will. So PERF actually, for a number of years, were administering two funds. The 1945 fund, which would be people who had no Social Security but had PERF. And then if that employer's people voted in referendum to enroll in Social Security, they would be covered and enrolled in a 1955 plan. So they actually administered a 45 plan, a 55 plan, up until I think the late 60s when the last employer enrolled all their employees in Social Security. So for a long period of time, our public employees, and I've worked in the private sector, and well, when I say work, it's a little different connotation, but I was employed in the private sector and employed in the public sector. And I will tell you, there's always exceptions, but generally speaking, the public employee worked harder, was just as smart, and more dedicated than any private employee that I worked with in these few number of years. I've told some of the people I work with at a local bank here at some point in time that we work from 8 to 5. If at 5 o'clock you were heading into the office, you may not survive because people would be rushing out at 5 o'clock and boy, they'd take no prisoners. They wouldn't run over you. You could get in PERF and ask people to work a couple hours to get something out. Never said no, they just did it. And it's just we always hear, or I always did, and I'm sure you did when you started working in the public sector, oh, you're just another bureaucrat. And I was right out of college, and I thought, man, I think I'm working hard. I won't dare try to go to the private sector, but it is just the opposite. So you're all to be congratulated for what you do, the service that you've provided, and it's important service in many, many areas, in every area. But you deliver the product, and you deliver it efficiently, and you did a great job, and you should be congratulated for that. So let me see if we can just review a little bit. Apparently we can't. Okay, here we are. This is a list of cost of living adjustments. We won't cover each year, obviously, but it goes back to 1975. Well, is that it? Oh, okay. Quick fingers. 1975 was the first COLA that we can find that was ever approved by our legislature. So that means, in effect, that anybody retired July of 1946, if they were still living in 1974, they had never got an increase of any kind. And then in 75 was the first cost of living adjustment. And I think the years of the 47 years since that point in time, there's roughly 24 COLAs that were passed. In 23 years, there was no COLA passed. We'll track it from 91, which was the first 13th check, and there's some other income in there, but just review that, and you'll see it was done in different ways. Usually it was a percentage. Some cases, the very first one was a dollar amount based on the number of years of service the person had as an employee before they retired. But the COLA, and we use the word somewhat loosely, the COLA obviously should be reflective of the CPI in most cases, the Consumer Price Index. But we know in a number of years, and certainly in 2022, that was not the case. So the better reference probably when we talk about COLAs, although we'll continue to call it that, would be just the permanent increase in benefits. Because in many cases, the COLA was not that. It was a permanent increase, but it was not based on a consumer price index. And therefore, still, some purchasing power in certain years that there was quote unquote a COLA. There was still purchasing power that was lost in some of these years. But nevertheless, roughly 24 years there was a COLA, 23 years there were not. In 1991 was the first 13th check. And every year except 2003 and 2004, there had been a 13th check. In 2003 and 2004, there was a cost of living adjustment, a COLA. So there was an increase in retirement income of some form since 1991 until, which you all know this unfortunately, 2021. When the 13th check bill passed the House with a $50 increase, and Joe Loftus will cover some of this as well, passed the House with one dissenting vote and got to the Senate, and the Senate leadership never brought it to the floor of the Senate, so that bill was never voted on the 13th check, and it was substituted with the 1% COLA. From 1991 to 2006, typically the 13th check was a percentage of your benefit. Starting in 2006 through 2020, it was based on the years of service. The more years of service a person had, the higher the 13th check was. Many of those years, you will notice that the minimum was $275 in a lump sum, up to $450. And the House bill that again was passed in 2021, not adopted by the Senate, would have increased that by $50. You'll hear a report from Joe Loftus and the board is what they're looking at to do in 2023, which has not been finalized, by the way. And the board always appreciates your input, coming through the chapters or coming directly. You can call the office if you have suggestions, ideas. You can write, you can email. And the one thing that we'll make sure happens is that whatever your recommendations, suggestions are, they will get to the board. But the board has the difficult decisions of trying to determine what they're going to ask for, what is reasonable to think they can get through. And so that always rests with your board. But nevertheless, whatever suggestions you have, please let us know and we'll make sure that the board is aware of that. The membership, we went back to 1972. And you'll notice the big decrease happened from 2021 to 2022 when we were down approximately 3,500 members from 2021 down to 2022. It's our humble opinion, and his opinion, but that is almost totally a result of the legislation. There's some people who may have other reasons to not join, but many, many of our people, and probably many in this room, were extremely disappointed that not only that you lost the 13th check, but a 1% COLA was passed by the session. And again, Joe will get into the details of that. But so you'll know that the COLA is always applied to the monthly defined benefit, that portion of your benefit that's paid for by your employer. The most recent information provided by NPERS shows that there's a little over 9,000 people that get $180 to $200 a month on their defined benefit. So that means, obviously, that the 1% COLA increased their monthly check or deposit by $1.80 or $2. Had the House bill got through, and this is what we've got to do a better job of educating the legislator, the minimum lump sum in a 13th check under House Bill in 2021 was $325. So it takes roughly 14 years for those people, just setting those two facts together, to recoup that. Now, if you can explain to a 90-year-old retiree that 1% COLA, who's, by the way, is probably those folks that are getting that lower benefit because salaries were so much lower when they worked. So many of these folks will be in that category of $180 or $200 a month. And try to explain to them, particularly say a 90-year-old or whomever, the 1% COLA is a really good thing. It's fine for the very, very high income people and the younger people, but even those folks, in many cases, I would tell you, were disappointed in losing the 13th check and replaced with a 1% COLA. And we'll close by telling you also that the Indiana Retired Teachers Association, who's our sister organization, obviously, for RIPIA, even though the average retirement benefit of the teachers is higher, in some cases because of salary, in many cases because of longer years of service, they were and are as disappointed in the fact that that 13th check was lost as well. So your board, again, will be getting together with the Indiana Retired Teachers Association, listening to your input, and make a decision as to what best chances we have in 2020.